Okay, we left off, we're on 112. Okay. Din tikuni tefillin dimrutus. Fixing tefillin and fixing the straps. In miskalkal or shel shnei batim miboti arosh. Zeh itzel zeh. If two of the compartments in the sharosh became damaged, and the two compartments were next to one another, zeh itzel zeh. Imat tefillin yishonim psulim. If the tefillin are old, it's possible. Vimhem chadosh m'ksherim. But if they're new tefillin, it's still kosher, we'll see. Kozman she'or moshev habatim kayom. As long as the leather of where the bias stands, meaning the base, is still intact. We'll see, let's see what this means. Niskalkel. Pirush nifsak v'nasa kera. You have a tear in the leather. Miboti arosh, aval nasa kera b'bayis shel yad. Postal kuliyamo b'chol inyon. If the bias of the shel yad becomes torn, it has a gash in it. It's possible whether it's new leather, old leather. Avshash atitura kayemis. Although the base, means the rim around the tefillin, is intact. Lo dom the sharosh nishtaibo or al koponim is a batim shleimim. Here is differentiating. Ernie. You have four compartments. So even if two of them are torn, you have the other two which are still intact. Each one is a separate compartment. But the shel yad, it's one compartment. The whole compartment is torn. So regardless, once it's torn, it's not valid. We're not talking about if the shin, let's say the shin is obliterated as a result of the tear. Then it's like not having a shin. We're talking about the front or the back. Right. What Zeitzel said, Ratzom da batim im smuchim zelo zeh. Afilu im ein akroim smuchim. Yeah, even let's say that it's not one gash goes through both, on the outside. The two tears are separate tears in the leather. Kagon kere echod bebayis hasheni bedofno hayimini. One tear is us in the bias, the second on the right. The kera hasheni bayis hashlishi loshno bedofno hayimini o smoli afilum kera zel lamalo v'zel lamato. Koshkim shneim ba'avir echod zek keneged zek posum. Yishonim psulim. We say if the leather is old, it's posum. Why? Because we say that tear happened because of the leather is actually deteriorating. That's why the tear came about. We're not saying that a person took a metal implement and cut through it. We're talking about the leather cracked by itself. So if it already cracked by itself, and because of the age, it just cracked, let's say the leather dried out, and therefore you have this tear in it, that's an indication. Even the others that are still intact, basically the leather has already reached a level of age where it's just temporary, that it's still holding together. Okay? So others say just to the contrary. If a new leather, you have the crack, that means it wasn't processed properly. There was something faulty in the process, and therefore that reveals that it's not kosher. Even the other ones are still intact. The same process, the faulty process, was applied to the other ones also. What about, he says, it happened as a result of a knife. The first understanding, the way Mishna was differentiating why old tefillin not apostle and new tefillin are not apostle, because that it started to crack is an indication of that the leather itself is deteriorating. But he says, what happens if the tear came about the result of a knife? The Dibuk Mahani im Onu Yodim Shen Or Makukul. He says, Bishur writes that if you take glue and you glue it together where you have the crack, which means it came about as a result of a knife rather than it just started to deteriorate, then if you glue it, it would be okay. It's kosher. Even though those who say, we had a discussion earlier, the leather has to be one piece of leather. What about if you stitch it together, you glue it together? So there was an argument whether gluing or stitching allows it to be seen as one piece of leather. It says even the ones before who said that gluing is not, and that's why it was made out of one piece of leather, if you have the crack, you have the tear, if you glue it, even they would agree it's valid. Because it's still one piece. Because it's not an indication it's deteriorating. If two already cracked, that's an indication of the level of deterioration, that the leather already is at a level of, it's just a question of time before it falls apart. No. We're not speaking about the leather was severed. It's still attached at one point to the other batim, right? It just has a tear in it or a crack. So it says even according to those who say that initially it has to be made of one piece of leather and being glued together with stitch is not enough, to correct this imperfection, glue would be enough.
But if it's separated completely, that would be no good.
If you hold that it has to be orechot. If you hold that it has to be one piece of leather. Right. Chadoshim kshem afilu akera b'shnei batim b'shnei dofaseyim kayom hayratituro. Aval beisos pirush deboishu shleimin mikol hatstodim. Yer lo machshirinon elo mashinikra mibifnim b'mayis labayis. Beis Yosef says that the tear is only between the compartments. So it's something visually you don't see. Because factually each compartment is separate. It's only pressed together. But if let's say you separate them and the sofa sees it's torn in between, that's what we're discussing here. That the tear that we differentiate between new leather, old leather, it's in between, not on the outside. But the outside part of the bayis, even if one of the compartments on the outside is torn, it's possible. It's not valid. I mean, seemingly it's a discussion of Zekiel Van Beu, right? How seriously is it damaged? If visually you don't see it, we say, and that would be in between the batim, it's not a problem. But on the outside, where you see it, even if one of them is torn, we invalidate it.
We rule that the shalosh should be one piece of leather that is
naturally one piece.
Naturally one piece that ends up being molded and compressed.
Well, everybody agrees it has to be compressed. It has to be a square.
So in the case where it's not one piece,
then it has to be glued or stitched.
So glued or stitched would be.
They rely that gluing is the equivalent of one piece of leather.
There's a higher chance of defect than one piece.
There's nothing to do with it.
More places that you can have.
No, the defect is as a result of the process, of the tanning process. There was something in the tanning process that wasn't done right. That's the reason why the leather is deteriorating.
How do we know it's, for instance, we talked about people sometimes put their phone in the trunk of the car. Okay, and it's supposed to fuse or cold.
So that would be the equivalent he spoke about. What about it? Wait. He spoke about something being damaged as a result of a knife cutting through it. So let's say we attribute it to heat, or it was very cold, and afterwards the tefillin thawed, and when it thawed, that caused the crack. So I'm saying, so the expansion of the leather, that's no different than being cut by a knife.
You would know.
Maybe you would know it.
But like the software is not supposed to fix the button, is he?
He's qualified to it. Why? If he can. No, that's making. There's what we call a bottom maker, and there's a sofer who writes the parchments, right?
And the software is capable
Sure,
of...
definitely. Even if a person's not a sofer, he's capable, if he's trained to do it.
But are we still going to come to cracks in straps?
speaking about straps. No, this simon speaks about the batim and the straps, both. Let's say you have a strap. A strap has to be a certain width. Let's say it's torn halfway across, and what's left is a certain amount of leather, untorn. How do you look at that? Is that still valid? We'll see. The strap has a minimum in width. So if it's torn only to a point, and it has that minimum, it's still valid.
So it might still be very end where I wrap on my hand, tied around my hand. It's very cracked, and you can see the brown leather. It's not 4 inches from the
Doesn't mean anything.
Well,
First, it's nothing because it's all extra. It's extra.
It's extra.
I mean, even if you don't wrap it here, as long as it's secured on your upper arm, it's valid. It's
That's
sufficient.
just because from the little,
Right.
That's a common thing after a long time.
It's from the moisture
Moisture
also,
in the hands.
right? And everything, and the wear and the. Okay. We're holding the Ramah. Hago gam habatim shrich gam bebat shrichel yos kayomim el shnikru tzas. V'yish omen lehepech v'yishon ksherim chadoshim psulim v'nirli v'yish lahachmir lifsol b'shneim. That whether the crack is in the, you find it in the new leather or the old leather, either way we invalidate. V'elim chadoshim. What is chadoshim? When is leather still considered? How old does it have to be considered old? Ve'elohin chadoshim kozman shem hoyim oshchem osem beritzuos habayis mispashet v'niftoch nikra chodosh. Meaning there's still a certain elasticity to the leather. If you pull it and it still has that elasticity, then that's chodosh.
You mean the inside?
No, the leather itself. He says if you pull the strap
Oh, the strap.
and the bias, one second, if it's so dry to the point where it doesn't, you can't separate them whatsoever, then it's classified as yoshan, old. In miskalklu shnayim zeh shlo keneged zeh. What about if the crack, they're not adjacent to one another, they're not alongside one another? Rishnu shlishi is the first and the third ksherim. I feel like even the third, even if they're old. It's only if you have one next to another. That's the indication that it's just a question. They're totally deteriorated. The miskalklu shlosha batim. What if 3 are actually damaged as a result of this crack? That's an indication that it's clear that it's already, it has deteriorated.
But unless you open the battery, you have no way of knowing.
No, it's on the outside. No, we're talking about the outside. You know, it's interesting, there's an interesting halacha. What happens if you cook and it happens? Very often you take something off the shelf in the supermarket. You buy pasta. And very often there's larvae in the box.
Yeah.
So larvae ultimately becomes insects. And sometimes it festers in there. And when you cook it, you don't notice it. And all of a sudden you cook the pasta in the pot, in the water, you could see insects floating around. So of course you throw it away. What's the halacha if you find one insect? Just one.
Check it out.
Right? No. If we're talking about halacha, I'm not talking about whether you lead it or not. The halacha is you take it out, you're permitted to eat the pasta. What about if you find 2 insects? You take it out. 3? Once you have 3, there's a chazokah, it's been established that this is infested. And you're not permitted to eat it anymore. Even if you don't find it. We say it's there, but you haven't located it. That's chazokah. Here it says if you have 2 that are not adjacent to one another, it's valid. If you have 3, even though they're not adjacent, it's possible. Cholin you possible. This is not chazokah. What? No, they could be on the outer side. It means next to one another. The tears are not next to one another. The tears are not next to one another. Could be it's rove. If it's on 3, that's the majority of the batim. This is rove. This has nothing to do with chazokah.
I had a question before about you said there's a tear in the straps. You said it has to be minimum width. The minimum width is what's left.
What's left? What's left? What's left?
What's left has to be a
Minimum has to be a minimum.
diameter.
Yeah, we'll speak about it, what it is. Many years ago when people wore those tiny tefillin, and the straps were much narrower, right? So that barely makes the minimum. Those old tefillin, very narrow straps. But if you wear gasos, you wear the tefillin that made with a thicker hide, the straps are much wider. They could be like three times as wide as those narrow straps, what they used to wear around their arms. Let's see the Mishna Berura. Livsol b'shneim, said Ramo says, there are two opinions. Some say if the new leather cracks, it's possible. Some say the old. He says you should be machal b'shneim. Al kein yishliv so masher gilin hasorfim sheosin hadal lebatim nos nosem bitfus chodchen min or beim bais lebais kedei shlo ye nichvot uboletes umechapen mekom achtach mibifnim dei shiyeh nirem mibchutz sholim. He says, the sofrim, what they do, when you compress the tefillin, let's say the leather in between the boxes are not smooth, are not flat, so it's hard to press it together. So if they find there's like any excess, when they fold it over, let's say there's some excess leather, and because of excess, there's a crease. So when you press it, that crease is not going to allow it to be compressed evenly. So what they do is they just cut it off. What juts out, they just cut off. But that's a kera. That's a tear mebayis lebayis. So according to the opinion that if they're chadoshim, it's not a problem, right? If it's new leather, because it's not an indication of the deterioration of leather. But according to Ramo, there's an opinion that says that even if it's just to the contrary, if the new, it's where it's cut, that's where it's puzzled. You should have not puzzled. So according to that, these tools are going to be invalidated. Because here, although we're not attributing it to the leather, because it was cut by the sofer, you shouldn't wear those tefillin.
There's one thing I don't understand: the separation of the rosh. They're made out of leather.
Well, the separation is made out of leather. The whole rosh is made out of leather.
The compartments.
Of leather, correct.
Leather, but are they supposed to be of the same?
It's one long strip of leather, and when they mold it, they put it in the form, and they fold it over. And that's how they make the four compartments. It's like an accordion. Except they put it in a form, so it's more than an accordion. So they're actually equal. They're on top, they're flat, and the sides there's a certain symmetry because of the form. Zell, he says, if you pull the strap and the leather is expand, there's a certain elasticity to it. That's if the ridge, the base, is made out of the same piece of leather as the batim. It's not where you fit it in. If you saw the picture the other day, right? It's actually the bias comes down and it folds out the bias. And afterwards, they take that and they put it into the form. They stitch. When they stitch it, the stitch goes through the rim and through the bottom of the leather, which the bottom are made of. Right? So it's made of two. It's made of two separate pieces of leather. So by pulling the strap, it won't necessarily pulling on one is not going to affect the other. That's what he says. I'm not sure how to do it. I'm not. No, it doesn't have to be. No.
I mean, they used to write on it instead of all that.
If it says imam mabar, then it's one. I'm not sure. But the question is like this. I mean, if it's stitched together and the strap goes through the side, and you pull the strap, why shouldn't you pull everything? I mean, the strap is affecting every part of the tefillin, right? What difference does it make if it's one piece of leather, not two pieces? It says if you pull the strap, and the leather somehow moves, That means it has an elasticity. That means it has a moisture in it. That means it's still new leather. But if you pull it and it doesn't move, it's like it's
Brittle.
no, it's not brittle yet, but it's hard. It's like it's crystallized already. It's like solid. Then that means it's totally dried out. So what difference makes one piece left, two pieces left? Factually, it's all stitched together. But if the way we said it's folded under, and you stitch through both of them, understand? So the attached to the mabarte is the bottom of the bottom.
A good tefillin could last. The leather could last 20 years.
Hundreds of years, as long as you keep it in a climate-controlled location, it lasts for hundreds of years. Okay, let's see, Mrs. Sharon.